we start? Awesome. Okay, great. Let's do it.
Cool. All right.
Right, I'm gonna hide.
Good to go. Just start now?
Just start, yeah.
Okay, cool. All right. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining this webinar. My name is Maia Glikman. I currently work at Sony. I'm a coordinator, and we cover everything from drama development, comedy development, current programming. We have alternative and reality, but that's separate. Obviously, we're not going to talk about that. I've been there for over 3 years. What we do is, we have a team of drama executives and comedy executives, and we basically, Sony has kind of our business model is we're one of the last independent studios. So what we do is we have the really kind of great luxury of saying we can make any type of show we want to make, and we'll find a home to sell it. And as you can see, every day a new kind of outlet arises where you can potentially sell a show, which is fantastic because there are so many options, and which also makes it even harder to kind of give you guys the lay of the land of how to easily and succinctly sell a show, because the process is ever changing, and how you sell a show to a digital format like YouTube is very different than how you sell it to like a broadcast network like ABC. So we'll get into that, but Sony is really great because we get to tackle all of those areas, and our network is so wide. We basically deal with every single network and every single network out there. And we even try to create our own network with PlayStation, which will eventually probably be a place where you guys can find original content. On that end, we also work closely with other studios, except I think Warner Brothers might be the only one we don't align with because they're also one of the last independent studios. So the great thing about Sony is I can really speak to a huge wide range of what's out there and what we can do to get our shows on that network. Before Sony, I worked in different capacity also. I got to see the behind the scenes working on the producer end. I worked for a feature producer, the guy who produced Baywatch. And my time with him, we spent in Australia. I worked on the Dwayne Johnson movie, San Andreas, which was really great because it was like a $160 million budget film. So you got to see things on the production end of how to take what's written on the page, which just seems so large and so huge, and really get a sense and understanding as to how it translates to the screen and what that takes when it comes to money and, all the logistics behind it with stunts and how many takes you can do. Or, we had one tracking shot that was 3 minutes long that didn't cut. And every shot, we only had 3 takes to be able to do it because every shot was a $200,000 setup. So there's things like that to have in your background also when you're writing and when you're producing a show that's really helpful. I just worked on, we're developing a show that has yet to air. And one of the recent scripts, every episode we have a number that we can afford to produce the show. So say $3 million an episode for a comedy pilot or a comedy episode. One of the ones that was written recently, the writer, they just thought really big. So most of the show was action scenes with cars blowing up and just a lot of money. And basically as a creative executive, you have to kind of look at that script and just say, this is great writing, but there has to be a way that we can get these emotions and these character moments across the page without it costing us $12 million to produce the episode, because it's just not logistically possible. And that's the mentality of moving into the current space from drama development. But all of my experiences have been really helpful in approaching the work that I do right now at Sony. So before working for this producer, I also worked for Kathy Kennedy, who is president of Lucasfilm. My time with her, she's probably, I think, the most famous female producer in the world at this point, having done Back to the Futures and Jurassic Parks and Schindler's List and huge things. She is now at the helm of everything Star Wars. So I worked with her on Force Awakens. I would have been still working with her if ABC would have afforded to send more than, you know, just her to London to shoot the movie. But regardless, I got to see, you know, what it's like to work with the J.J. Abrams and Steven Spielbergs of it all. And that's really been a fantastic kind of eye-opening experience to see the cream of the crop and what their daily routines are like and who they deal with and the material they get pitched and sent. And so that's been really cool. And before her, I spent about, you know, 3-4 years at ABC working in drama development and also unscripted. And we did talk shows, we did cooking shows, we did like lifestyle shows. I helped develop Scandal. I helped develop Nashville. It was a really great time. That was when Modern Family, we developed it, and we were just pitching, you know, it was just about to be premiered. And so that it's also great to see the broadcast network mentality and develop of everything and get a sense of what their needs are, what their wants are, where they approach material, how they handle pitches and just how to tailor your material and your pitch and your show to sell to that specific place. So that was really fantastic. And, you know, before then I just had spent a lot of time in production and worked at an agency, and I went to Tisch at NYU, and I focused on directing, writing, and producing because I wanted to have, you know, I'm very much on the creative end, and I wanted to have that knowledge to back up my choices and my opinions. And at that time, I also was thinking it could be a good route to just be that specifically creative. But, you know, you find that being an executive is insanely creative, and you have a hand in so many shows at Sony. I you know, touch upon 30 shows a week. And so it's really great to have that kind of wide spectrum of writers, directors, producers that I deal with, and executives. And so that's been really, really fantastic. And yeah, in a nutshell, like I make a goal of wanting to know everything there is to know about every aspect of our business. So I love the fact that I get to deal with the digital, I get to deal with the comedy, drama, current, all across the board. And as things are changing, we adjust and kind of proceed and try and tackle and lock down that new area. Like Sony, I'm sure you've seen in the headlines and Deadline, our entire team has kind of reconfigured because our presidents now are creating a scripted realm at Apple. And so that's also something that Apple, Snapchat, Facebook, these are all places that we have yet to see any content, but it's in the works. And that's incredibly exciting because, I mean, the Snapchats of, I can imagine there's going to be user-friendly content and some sort of kind of interaction between audiences and the actual show. And it's just exciting to see that if you're past in one area, there are so many other places that could entertain possibly having a show. So yeah, in a nutshell, I love TV, and I want to make amazing TV. And I think Sony is doing a great job right now. You know, I'm sure you guys hopefully have gotten to see some of our new shows, Atypical on Netflix, which just got renewed for a second season, and it's fantastic, wonderful character work. We have One Day at a Time, which is one of our comedies that I love, and Rita Moreno's in it, and we just wrapped season 2. That's one that I'm very close on. And Future Man is one that will soon be on Hulu with Seth Rogen and Evan Goldberg help produce it, and Josh Hutcherson's our lead. You know, we have Outlander, Blacklist, Better Call Saul. You know, we were represented at the Emmys tonight. So it's all incredibly exciting. And I'm just happy to be able to share any of my experiences or knowledge with you guys to help you hone in on how to, you know, not waste your time and get your show where it needs to be as fast as possible. And, you know, Roadmap Writers is really great because I've already worked with a couple of you. I help do the monthly mentor thing. And, you know, I actually do one-on-one notes with some of you guys. And I'll say, like, I've seen some really great progress. And I have agent friends who are constantly asking me, you know, for my suggestions for, new people to sign or any new ideas. And so I really encourage you guys to continue to keep pitching me and keep checking in with me about stuff, because I want to help any way I can. This is just such a tough business. And I know, especially since you guys are doing this on a Sunday and make the extra effort, I can tell the work ethic is there, and the energy, and which is what we always want in a room is, I was just on a call with our labor and legal folks, because one of our staffs on a show, the showrunner is very upset because this person we hired said they would be his strong number 2, and they have been coming in after 10 and leaving before 6 and not maintaining focus while there. And so that's something we really look at, is the work ethic and who that person is, and how they vibe with other people. And so I just say good on you all for working so hard and spending so much of your time honing in on these skills. And I'm going to try and look at your questions and answers now and try and get to as many as possible, because I want to, give you guys as much knowledge as we can in this brief time. So let me start with some of these questions, and then, I will kind of get into a scope of some overalls as to how the process is, because as I said, it's ever changing. So it's kind of hard to give you just the step 1, step 2, step 3 kind of bullet points. So let's get into this. And if you guys have any other questions or want me to further explain anything, please jump in, because I'm definitely reading what you're noting on the side here. Okay, so first step after you have stable scripts ready to send out, I would say, first of all, I would really, really make sure your scripts are ready to send out, because I've been sent a ton that are riddled with little typos and formatting errors. And unfortunately, I do know a lot of executives who make a point of being very strict on that end, and agents also who are just say, if that's not where it needs to be, I can't bank on the writing being where it needs to be. So just make sure your scripts really proofread, have somebody who's never read it proofread it. I'm sure, I think Roadmap, you can hire someone to proofread it. I'm happy to do a pass. Just let it, just make sure that it's really in tip-top shape. And once you have those scripts, I would say it's really, really difficult in this day and age to just get it even in front of an agent. But that's something that I really want to help with. And so talk to the guys at Roadmap. But if there can be some way to have me help get it somewhere, I really do have agents at every single agency in town who constantly ask me for new, really great new writers. And so that's something that I make a point of wanting to help with. That's one avenue, is just to have somebody like myself who can just get it in front of somebody. You can, get it put in contests. That always has people flagged, because I know a lot of agents and managers and companies that make a point of going to these festivals and going to these online competitions and just checking out who some of those kind of up and coming people are. We look at things like the Blacklist, which has all these really great scripts that agents put out there and are saying these are new voices that I think are fantastic. To speak to that, I just have to say it's incredibly difficult. You just really kind of have to find anyone out there who has a voice in the industry and have, it's just all pounding the pavement. I have a friend who is a showrunner's assistant, and she still can't even get her boss to read her script. So I'm trying to help her get agency, and I'm, giving her notes on her scripts and just trying to make them better. But just keep practicing. Don't give up. I mean, I will say, just job hunting as on an executive side, it's normally around nine months to a year of interviewing to even get a job, because we are just so saturated with people who want to move up, and people like yourselves who have those great scripts but just don't have that contact. And unfortunately, I see a lot of writers move up who just, you know, are buddies with some of the higher ups and just get in that way. But so I would say keep doing what you're doing. You know, try and solidify those contacts. And I'm happy to offer myself as one, and really discuss kind of places that you think you'd want me to nudge and send your script. Because if anything, it only makes me look better to be able to find a new fantastic voice and help them get on a show. And, you know, it's all about paying it forward and everything. So I know that's not a very clear, you know, definite answer, but that's sort of what the nature of the game is. I'm finding, and I'm saying this because I'm, you know, with the shifting of Sony and all, we've all been interviewing and trying to see what other jobs are out there, getting promoted and just moving up a little faster. And it's just, even just to get an interview at a company you need to have like the president of a company call and vouch for you. So this day and age, the nepotism in Hollywood is just so rampant that it's really hard to not have that backing to move ahead, unfortunately. Okay, let's see. Now let's talk about different.
I popped back in for a second. Sorry. How many questions do you have in there? Because mine just got erased. You have a bunch?
10, 11?
Oh, great. Okay, good. You can see them. Great. Okay. Ignore me. Mine all erased. So I want to make sure you still have them and we don't have to react. Bye.
No worries. And if I go too much on a tangent or anything, just let me know. I'm just trying to, I feel like I just want to, you know, be as specific as possible with these folks.
Yeah, it's your lecture. You know, you do whatever you got planned. You got it.
Okay, cool.
Thanks. Okay, bye.
Okay, bye. So let's get into the different outlets that we have, because that'll sort of tailor your kind of process to get, you know, from page to pitch. So we have the typical CBS, Fox, ABC, CW, and, you know, they haven't really changed from how they normally have functioned as a broadcast network, where you do the typical have the studio that, you know, works with that network call and connect with that executive and say, listen, you know, I have this pitch that I think is really great. One example is Sony had a show that was about a summer like town like Nantucket, and it was very soapy and sexy. And what we weren't sure how sexy it could get. So for, say, an ABC pitch, we definitely kind of ramped up the soapy aspect, like a revenge, but like very fun character stuff, but enough that there would be 22 episodes a season, and not jump the shark in any way and not alienate our audiences by having it be something a little too saucy that we couldn't get the younger audience. Because obviously ABC especially wants to try and get as many audiences as possible for the best ratings, obviously. So we have the broadcast networks. I will say this day and age, writers, directors, producers are less interested in doing something on broadcast because of the fact that you have that pressure to submit 22 story ideas. You have that pressure to keep yourself censored, to not be able to tackle certain things, like especially with the political climate. Like if you mention something that's too Trump heavy, they'll you know pull back. If you mention something that sounds a little too inappropriate, it just seems like writers can't really just flow and really enjoy their time writing when they're constantly being put in this little box. So, but at the same time, money, 22 episodes, you make money, you know, and you get to the syndication faster, and you know, broadcast networks have a lot of power. They do at this point still. They do reach the most amount of audiences. And I'll say Game of Thrones, I think, is fantastically kind of changing that. which I'm really grateful for, is they're kind of making audiences push the boundaries and want smarter TV and something a little more intense and not censored. So there, we have broadcast. Then we have, the cable folks like AMC and Lifetime, MTV, VH1, those ones that are on cable give us a little more leeway to get into the darker, grittier stuff and not feel so censored. But at the same time, there still is censorship. You can't go full nude like our Masters of Sex show and some other shows where we don't want to limit the human condition where people have sex and showcase the human body and are, all of that good stuff. We don't want to be limited to that. But at the same time, it's not a subscription based, so it still will reach more audience. I think we saw that with Breaking Bad and the success of Breaking Bad and like the Sons of Anarchy of it all. And they still get a really large audience, but not as much as broadcast. And you can kind of see, a full man's backside and don't have to worry about showing butts and stuff like that. But it still is a little taboo to go a little too far on that end. But then we have places like the HBO, Showtimes. I think Sundance, even with Top of the Lake, they were showing full frontal nudity and all that stuff. So those areas just really kind of writers, producers, directors love, because less restrictions, less kind of pinning you into a box, less notes, honestly, because it's sort of like they just want writers and directors to put the best content out there. And that basically means to not censor them and give them too much notes, because we want them to make the show that they set out to make. From there, we go to now the places like Netflix, Amazon, Hulu. Those are our sweet spot, I have to say, Sony especially, because we get pitched and work with a lot of high brow, high content writers and directors who will basically say, I'm not censoring anything, and this is the show I want to make. And yeah, like I've never seen such a smoother kind of notes process with Netflix and Hulu and Amazon. They pretty much, they have their notes, but if there is pushback, they really kind of align more with the creative content in the show, and kind of believe that producers set out to make a fantastic show. And if we empower them and give them that ability, then we'll see it. And I think we've proven that with some of our shows. Bloodline was certainly one of them on Netflix. I know specifically the season finale executives were not super thrilled with, because it was a little confusing, but even giving notes, producers stood firm and they got to put out the show that they wanted to put out. And I think that also makes those places the most desirable for writers, because they feel so supported and so empowered and so backed up by the powers that be, and end up making a show that they really feel passionate about. I really encourage all you guys to watch Atypical. It's our new show on Netflix about a boy with autism. It's so beautifully done, and I really think that they really let the showrunner make the show she wanted to make, and it shows. And I've yet to hear one even remotely negative thing, because she didn't have to give up any of her convictions to get across the story she wanted to make. So I mean, and things are changing. We'll see what turns out with Apple. We're just getting into the YouTube of it all very slowly. We haven't yet even made a pilot for that network yet. We're just talking about staffing a room and getting a schedule done and all that stuff. So sorry, I'm getting distracted a little by the questions. I just want to make sure I'm answering everybody's questions. So we'll see how that happens. Right now, our first step as a studio is to go to those networks and say, now that you are a network, what are the type of shows that will make your brand, and what is it that you're looking for and wanting? Like, do you want a workplace comedy that is female driven? Do you know what I mean? Like, what are those kind of broad strokes that you want, so we can go back to our writers and hone in on some good ideas to come and pitch. And so once those new networks get up and running, the best thing is for a studio to kind of get FaceTime or a call in and just say, like, we're going to be pitching you shows. What can we bring you that you would actually want? And so, so once that happens, that's the studio's job. Is we work with the writers and the creative, and we perfect the idea. And then we are like the middleman between the writer and the network. And we call them and say, we have this idea. Would you like to hear it? If so, like, do you have anything else that would be competitive? Because this helps us kind of hone in on what to adjust with the pitch. So we would take then the pitch to this network. And so for the summer show that I mentioned, ABC, we would pitch it differently than we would pitch it like Lifetime. Lifetime, we would say, like, we would really want to focus on the sex aspect of it and really dive in on those really kind of gritty, dark character moments. And with ABC, I would say we would want to hone in more on the soapy nature. And so there are things to kind of press forward that would really kind of let the network know that this show is kind of a perfect fit for them. If that makes sense. So then once you get a sense of what networks want to hear what, then you go in and pitch. And so the writers typically would come into Sony and they would give us like a mock pitch, and it's practice makes perfect, obviously. And so you just hone in on how to either, are you gonna have flashcards? You're gonna have the entire thing memorized? Are you gonna come in with kind of like a PowerPoint presentation? Are you gonna have any visuals? Sometimes it's helpful to have like a cast board to give a sense of this character, here's the description, but I also want you to picture, if you say an older, smart woman, and then you give the sense of like a Meryl Streep compared to, or like an Alfred Woodard or something like that. It just helps give the show a life in the network executives' mentality, which makes it harder for them to pass on if they really do love it. So once the show, once you're in the room and pitching, a fantastic thing can happen where the network can just be so enamored by the pitch and afraid to like not be one of the places that can really land that show. They'll buy it in the room. That's always a really great option. And, it's happening less and less these days, but when it happens, it's really exciting. They buy it in the room. So if you're selling one of your pilots, you say you have 10 pitches set up and you sell it, the first pitch sells in the room. That doesn't mean anything. You keep pitching and then you could have a bidding war. Say the first place sells in the room. It could be that no other place buys. It could be that every other place buys. Or it could be just like maybe a few other, you get a bidding war. And, the business affairs people all negotiate that and kind of work out where it would be most beneficial for the show to land. Maybe weird things come into play. Like maybe a network could be like, we'll buy this show, but also if you bring to us, this next idea, blah, 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 or we'll say, listen, we have a bidding war, five networks want it. We'll take this to you if you also buy this other show from us. So it's a lot of weird, like kind of bizarre negotiations. Like, I don't know, I'm sure you guys were aware our show Timeless was canceled for like a few weeks and NBC canceled it. And then our bosses, Empowers That Be, they got on the phone and talked out a new scenario. They basically were like, listen, if you pick Timeless back up, we'll do this, this, and this. And it's a lot of like the head honchos kind of hashing all of those specifics out. So once say bidding war is over, you guys choose a network, the fun begins, right? So a network they'll have signed off on the verbal pitch, and so then what they'll first need is probably like a series Bible, so you can give them the lay of the land of like short ideas for every episode for the first season, second season arc, third season arc, just overall where the characters are going emotionally. Just give them a sense like you just bought a show that has, a life for several years. And, that's everyone wants, at least 5 or 7 years to be able to produce a show, because that's when syndication comes into play and that's when you make the most amount of money. Most deals you'll see with writers and actors and everything, they have a 7-year deal. So all of these shows, like Veep is at 7 years, they're about to end. A lot of these places, they have holding deal, the talent, you're stuck on the show for 7 years unless we cancel it. If we want to pick it up for more seasons after that, that's when the negotiations become. Like Big Bang Theory, you think they'd be making $1 million if they were still under 7 years? No, they're making $1 million an episode because they have the ability to negotiate on that end, because they surpassed that 7-year mark. Okay, so then you submit the story area. Now here's where studio network differences come into play again. Every piece of material a writer submits goes to the studio first. Studio will give notes and assess it and kind of help you get it into shape so it's in the best form it can be before you send it to the network. Once it gets, the network, we want them to know that we're working hard to make this show also what they bought. It's a very collaborative kind of process that there's a lot of give and take between both parties. Some networks will, as I said, Netflix and stuff will kind of let the producers fly, but then you'll definitely see a lot less of that. Broadcast networks, that's not going to happen ever. You have so many people who need to weigh in, and then they have all like the standards and practice and legal and all that stuff because advertisers and blah, 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 because it's on a network. So ABC, they give notes, like insane amount of notes, from every single color draft you make, they'll want a note. So what we want to do as a studio is get ahead of that and on our end, kind of know what certain character problems could be and address those and fix those before it even gets to the network. So typically it'll be like studio story area. We'll note it. You guys will adjust to address our notes. And then you'll most likely send it back to the studio. So it's a revised studio story area. And then we'll let you know if we need you to make any other revisions, or if we are just like, this is fantastic, just send it off to the network. And then we'll send it to the network and then they'll do their notes. So then it'll be them noting the story area and then they'll send us off to outline. And then the outline will come straight to Just Studio. Again, start with us. And then we'll do the same thing, revise, and then go to network. And we do that with the draft. And hopefully, it'll be in great shape that we can get it into a production draft and a draft that will be what we want to make our pilot to be. And then the network will decide if they want to put the money in and buy it and give them, a production commitment to make it into a pilot. And then that's when all the fun stuff starts, where you can get into casting and shoot the pilot. And then once you shoot the pilot, it'll be, you'll deliver it to the cut to the studio. So we'll have our chance to address the notes, and then we will send it to the network. And that's when they need to make the decision, what seems most promising for their slate and what to buy. Some shows, the network sees the benefit of just outright making a series commitment. So, you wrote the pilot and they're just like, we're just buying this for series. And some, it's difficult to do that. Like the broadcast networks, you rarely ever see that. So that's, it's a lot of noting and a lot of talking and, a lot of back and forth and managing different personalities. And, I've worked with some networks where the executives are really aggressive with their notes and I've heard, you know, screaming matches between writers and executives because everyone's so passionate about wanting to get this great show made, but they have different views as to how to do that. So yeah, so that's kind of the back and forth. Somebody asks the difference between a studio and network, and I think it's a great question in terms of distribution and production. So studio, in general, before like the Netflix of it all, we own the content. What we do is we have our own production people. We do it all. We basically do everything to own the show, and the network can then buy it from us, which is what we have, like a license fee. And sorry. Okay, I'll get to these questions in a second. I'm so sorry. So studio, we are the ones who, we are the ones who work with the writers and directors, and we do everything and basically package it up to just send it to the network. And, Netflix is changing the game because what they're doing now is they're taking ownership of the show because they want to be able to sell it and make that money off of it. When you're the one who owns the show, you have the potential to make the most money off of it. We can sell our stuff internationally, anywhere, like license fees. So when you see repeats of some of our shows on like TBS and USA, they've spent millions of dollars just to be able to basically buy our show for a certain amount of time to just air it on their network. So it's beneficial. I think the studio, it's beneficial for them to make money that way. Network, they make money through advertisers. They will buy our show and they spend money that way, but then they make back bank with the advertisers and everything. And as far as distribution goes, really depends on the project and the story. I mean, not the story, the project and the studio and network of said show. Sony is sometimes a distributor in just some shows, and we're not creatively involved, and sometimes we are. And so that one, it really just depends on what you negotiate and the powers that be and what is done in the deal. Production, studio handles the production, but network has their production folks to basically do their due diligence. Like our production people will send cost reports to the network. Say for our one show on Hulu, we sent the cost reports to Hulu and their production executives and let them know, like, we're over budget on this show because of, A, B, and C in production. You guys need to come back to us and see what we can do to bring down those costs, and then creatively we can kind of tackle how to do that. You'll see Breaking Bad. I don't know if you remember the episode The Fly. It was a bottle episode where they were basically in that in the chem lab the entire time. That show was written specifically because they were over budget and they needed to create a scenario where they could save money and produce a very inexpensive episode. And the great thing about working with writers like Vince Gilligan and Sean Ryan and those type of people is it doesn't hinder the material. It doesn't hinder the story and all that stuff because they can write well enough to create a fantastic show where it doesn't feel like you're in this tiny, small environment and not getting the most out of the experience. So that's essentially the huge difference. Networks have the power essentially because they're the buyers, and studio, we buy from writers and producers and talent and stuff like that. But we have to fight and make sure we get those sold on a network. Otherwise, we're just losing tons and tons of money. So I think studio has a lot more at stake. Yeah, but again, the game is changing on the daily. So, Okay. If somebody asked two TV scripts to choose from, probably from the studio perspective or the network perspective, a great script that has some mild structure problems or a good script that has perfect TV structure, which one would you prefer? That is a great question. That is a really great question. So here's different scenarios. Now, if we have a great script that has some mild structure problems, this is sort of how we would tackle it. If the idea is so insanely good and just the characters are laid out really well and we just see such life in the show, there's 100% a scenario where either comedy, drama, we would say, I see the potential in this, but as it is now, it's not strong enough to really get it. It's not strong enough to be the best that it could be at the moment. So we would kind of marry that person, that writer, with someone who has the experience to help them hone it in on and get it to that perfect place, if that makes sense. We have, for example, in maybe one of our shows, we were pitched by insanely baby writers, which is as like a favor. I think that they were like friends with a huge producer like a Seth Rogen, and obviously to maintain that relationship, we opted to take the pitch. They pitched something that was so ridiculously cool and interesting and we haven't heard of, that we were like, send us something. We want to see what you guys are capable of doing. And so we got to see their writing capabilities and their style. And it wasn't all there, but we knew that these guys were the type who we could get there eventually. So what we did is we found a really high up level EP and partnered them up for a brief amount of time and had them work together. And he helped hone in their script to where it needed to be. And as the show progressed, they continued that relationship. So these guys were our kind of creative, they are creative point people, but they were always kind of massaged and backed up by this strong number two. And we found that kind of partnership and relationship created a scenario where it ended up getting the script to a point where it was in the best shape and it tackled the structure problems that we noticed and kept in the great content. So that's one scenario. There could be a scenario where those baby writers, we don't have that tight of a relationship with them yet. So it could be something like, we're going to buy this idea from you and we'll let you staff on the show, but we're not going to let you be any sort of driving force for the show. And some people are good with that because they just want to get, the recognition, their name in their room and something to put on their resume. We've had scripts that have come in with perfect TV structure and they're lacking in character, and we've immediately passed on those. I will say structure is, it's formulaic and it can be done by just looking off of those great books that teach you how to write. But if you don't have those strong characters, then it'll never get sold. That's something. So then I guess to answer the question, a great script that has some mild structure problems is 100% more preferred than something that has perfect TV act structure. Because structure is something that can be done in 2 seconds. To come up with that great idea and those great moments in the script is not easy in the least bit. So that's a great question. And that's something to think about as a writer. Do work on your structure, but don't ever submit a script that you're like, the structure is perfect, but I'm not sure about the character quite yet. Always, always, always make sure the characters are memorable and what you leave the executive with, because we walk away thinking like, I need to know what happens to that person. I need to stay with this character and I need to buy the show because I can't stop thinking about it, kind of thing. I'm not sure what the question means when hired for network. It seems you are pushed toward exec. I'm not sure how to answer that. Who hired to network? Like a writer? know if you can clarify what you mean by that.
It looks like they just
So,
clarified yes.
sorry, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. It looks like they just clarified yes, a writer if you're hired to network. And also, just so you guys know, I love that you're checking this chat box, which is great. But if people can take their questions into the question and answer box, the chat box is sort of just for the, I mean, you're welcome to go through the chat box, but for our purpose.
Oh, I'm trying to, the chat box is kind of distracting me a little, so I'm trying to focus on the question and
So
answer
guys,
box.
ignore, like the chat box is just sort of for writer. I mean, it's great that you're looking at it, but it is distracting. So questions, people are asking questions in that chat box. Please copy and paste your question or whatever, put it in the question and answer box. Just, okay, moderator
right,
out.
I'm going to close the chat box.
Yeah,
thank you.
So if you have a question,
I closed the chat box.
The other one. Great. Okay.
Yeah, perfect.
Okay, bye.
Okay, bye. Someone asked a great question. How do studios like Sony choose which writers to work with, give deals to? Through rising writers who have worked on their shows, they ever keep tabs on new and upcoming writers? Fantastic question. So here's what we do. First of all, the writers we give deals to are not baby writers. You will never find a baby writer with a deal unless it's like a Stranger Things kind of success. Never. We have deals with Sean Ryan. We have deals with Bryan Cranston. It's like those high level people. And basically what you're saying when you do a deal with a writer is you're saying, I own you, essentially. I don't want you to work with any other studio. I want all of your projects to come directly to me, which is fantastic because, you know, you find those, I think, you know, with The Shield and some of the earlier Sony shows with Sean Ryan, for example, we immediately saw the potential in his voice and just the fact that like we could see nonstop shows coming from him. And so given that, we said, you know, well, what if we give you $5 million a year or whatever, they negotiate $5 million a year. So you can just, you know, sell us as many, you know, pitched us as many ideas as possible. We could, any of those could sell or not, but you would have that salary just to make it so you only have us to pitch to. It's for us to lock him in and keep him for ourselves. So that's something really great is to be able to do that. Sometimes it's beneficial, sometimes it's not. You know, sometimes you spend the money and these people pitch ideas that nothing could ever go. And that's why sometimes you hear deals not being renewed. Because say a studio spent $400,000 with a younger kind of producer and they didn't bring in one project that sold, there's no reason for that studio to maintain that kind of budget on the side because it didn't come back to us. But with people like Sean Ryan, also when you have a deal with them and some of your shows have need help in the writing space, like Timeless, certain points they were writing a little too big, and some of us were like, what writers do we have deals with who could come in for one day a week and help tweak what they have written and get in the room with these guys? And obviously that writer would have to agree to do that, but that's also a scenario that having a deal with writers can be really beneficial. Rising writers are the ones who essentially, like, we see them being staffed on a show and consistently deliver just really fantastic material. And once they keep delivering material, then their agents will call us and be like, listen, you've seen they're legit. You've seen they can give you guys great stuff and what you want. Can we start getting into development with them? And when we agree to do development with them, then we have them spend time with our development team and kind of work on potentially getting stuff to pitch, which could be exciting for them because that's their own show and their own idea rather than having been just stars working on other people's concepts and in other people's rooms. We absolutely do keep tabs on new up and coming writers. I do as well. I talk to agents daily and I'm checking in like, is this person staffed on a show? No. Are they only doing development? Are they interested in potentially staffing? We have things coming up down the line. I mean, these are conversations I have daily. A show ends and these Netflix shows that have 10-week room runs, they end and writers are quickly available. So it's so cyclical. Things are changing. That's why you constantly have to be checking in on these new and up-and-coming writers. One writer that specifically on the Sony end that we fell in love with she was such a baby up-and-coming writer. We had read one of her scripts years ago about a school shooting that was just her idea, and we just thought the writing was fantastic, but it wasn't a show. It was just kind of a writing sample. And she ended up getting staffed on the first season of Stranger Things, and her script was the best one of the season. And so once we saw that, we immediately called her agent and said, is she available? Can we start doing development with her and work on creating a show of her own? Because we immediately were like, we loved her original idea writing, but thought it was just too tough to sell as a show, and saw that she could be on a successful show and be the best part of it. And then now, we want to, hone in on that success and ignite it forward with Sony attached. So that's something really great. Yeah, it's constant conversations. I don't think you realize behind the scenes as a writer how often your name is being pitched and brought up verbally. People are constantly sending like, who at Sony is reading right now? I just want you to be familiar with this writer. So it's that's why the agents get their 10% and the managers get their 10%. It's a lot of back and forth. And, on my end also, it's like I cover current shows. So there's material that come in for that and staffing that I need to read for that. But then, agents are constantly like, Maia, have you had a chance? I sent you this person a month ago. Excuse me. Have you had a chance to check in and read their sample? And, I might be like, I'm so sorry, but I haven't, but thank you for reminding me and checking in. I'll read them this weekend. So it's a lot of checking in on that, which is great. So next great question, Joanne, you're asking really fantastic questions. How often do you buy a spec pilot that's already written versus a pitch? This has been a huge change recently. Spec pilots, I have to tell you, they really don't sell. They don't. It's the hardest thing in the world to get a spec script sold, because selfishly, a network executive wants to hear a pitch and they want to feel also that they're creatively involved to some degree. And how they do that is, when you send them those story areas and the outlines and the drafts, their notes and tailoring it towards their notes makes them feel as though they have a real stake in the show, that they have a real investment. And so we've seen that. I honestly can't remember the last time a spec sold at Sony. And it's tough because it's tough because some places say that a spec can be better because it's already packaged and perfect, ready to go. The network can just buy it and immediately get it made. But networks they're wanting to be creatively involved. I mean, they just are. I mean, Netflix, they're taking producer credit. You know what I mean? So there is no rhyme or reason or explanation as to why people might tell you. Like when I was in college, in my writing classes, I was told you could not get an agent without a spec script. Now I'm being told you can't get an agent if you only have a spec script. So I totally get how you guys are like insanely frustrated with getting the runaround. There's no rhyme or reason, but it depends on the executive. It depends on the network. There's so many variables and factors, which is sort of why I was like, I feel like question and answering with this webinar might be the best way to go, because I don't know how to, I don't think just overall arcing explanation of how to get some things from pitch to launch would cover most of this. So yeah, specs, it's tough, but at the same time, an amazing spec could get things done way faster than an amazing pitch. You know what I mean? So I would say if you are going to limit your time to focusing in one area, I would try and have, rather than a fully perfected spec pilot, I would have just a great pitch, a great series Bible, and then so a lot of the times networks in the room will be like, oh, you have a pilot written, why don't you send to me, and then they might have adjustments or whatever. But just having great material in general, whether it be original or a spec, is important. So don't take that answer as like it's a waste of your time to do a spec, because it's not. It's just people really want to get a sense of your original voice, and sometimes it's hard to really get that across in just submitting a spec off of an email. It's like network execs feel less invested. I know that's weird. That's a weird kind of response, but they like being involved in the notes process. So, but working on both is always the biggest beneficial thing to do on your end. As far as areas, genres see trending right now, what's marketable, I would focus on the number one thing I would say is just make your characters amazing. Don't worry about, like, procedurals are so not what people care about when I'm out there pitching and hearing what networks want. They're like, I want a character that I just can't wait to invest my time in weekly. So I'd really focus on just incredible characters that are dynamic and strong, and strong females are really what a lot of networks want. Strong females, it depends on where you're looking. Like there are some places like Lifetime, with the success of Unreal, they're looking at more of those realistic, darker kind of dramas. Then there are places like AMC that want more of like the Preacher type of stuff, where you're seeing more of like the superhero comic genre kind of soar. ABC's all about the soap. So I'm to not get into specifics for each network. Basically, every single place has told me strong female and character, that they're less concerned with getting like a medical procedural buttoned up every episode. In fact, that actually is a huge turnoff. Our one show, Good Doctor, the network has made a couple comments. They're like, we just don't want this to be like medical case number 2. So that's something to think about. You just really need to just have that emotional thread throughout, strong emotion. How common is it for a network to pick up back 9 these days? Seems like short orders. That's a good question, because we have a couple of comedy pilots, especially, that they have their first pilot plus 12, and broadcast, I would say it's more likely for them, obviously, broadcast to pick up the back 9. All the other networks competitively, they just don't seem to care about doing 22 episodes. So for the back 9 for the broadcast, it's tough. It's really, really tough. Comedies, I would say they're more likely. Comedy seems like it's a better bet. Kevin Can Wait, they seem to pick up those back 9 real fast. If you have a strong talent attached, they're quicker to pick up those back 9 to make that person very happy. If a show is wavering in the ratings or seems like not a sure bet, that's when the back 9 really comes into play. If the ratings aren't a giant success, then you will not get a back 9. It'll be a short order, and then they'll most likely be like, if we want to do another season, it'll also be a short order, and we might move it to mid-season or summer. So it's a ratings game on that end for sure. Definitely ratings game. Even with like the pickups for additional seasons, One Day at a Time, and the Netflix and Amazon and Hulu's, they all too will wait for an entire season to air, and then even a couple months after that, just to wait for the ratings to even entertain a discussion about a season 2 or 3 pickup, which I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with, but once you start shooting a season, there are talent option deals so that expire. So say a season airs in September on Netflix, you have until December to make a decision if you are going to pick up for a season 2 or 3, because that's when our deals with our actors will end. And then if they're not available, then we don't have a show, even if you wanted to pick up for season 2, you know? So it's things like that, like Daytime Divas on VH1. We haven't heard if they want to pick it up for a season 2. It's seeming unlikely because it's been so long. And Vanessa, our lead in it, her talent deal is up soon. So it's like, if we don't get a sense that there'll be a decision made by a certain point, then we know the show's dead because of those factors also. Now that syndication is basically dead, are they still buying 5 years? No. I have not seen any network buy 5 years, it's a bummer. There are some networks that will secretly be like, we'll buy 2 or 3 years because the show has just been such a success for us that it'll help expedite the process of writing and getting ahead of production and all of that stuff. But I have never at my time at Sony seen anything being bought for 5 years. Mm-mm. The only thing I would say for like those big 5-year things, yeah, no, I haven't. I'm trying to rack my brain. I'm like, I remember when shows like Modern Family found their success and became like huge hits and things like that. You know, they have the 5 or 7 year deals, and I have yet to see anything like that. It's a shame. Times are changing, man. If you are just table, not number 2, do you do all these notes revisions, or are they passed on to another writer? Do they still assign table writers to script? That depends on the show, 100%. It's interesting. When I worked at 2.5 Men, they had a room for younger writers who weren't even allowed to be involved in any notes process. They basically had one pass and then weren't involved anymore because the higher ups wanted to do all the revisions. One of our shows on one of our cable networks, we're not in the room, the studio execs, so I can't even really speak to specifically that, but we have been told there are some younger writers who will write the full script and then the showrunner will take credit and cut certain things out. And so it all depends on the showrunner who's running the room. It does, because certain people, excuse me, certain people need to feel like they have the full control. And so we don't, as the executive, ever know who specifically wrote what line or who specifically wrote what. Sometimes it's just worked out in the deal. Like, out of all these episodes, you're required to assign or give credit to one, like the staff writer will get credit for one full script, but we don't ever actually know which full script they wrote. So it depends on the show. Unfortunately, that one I can't be insanely specific on. I will say though that like David Shore is one showrunner that really loves, it's all depending on the guild and all that stuff. David Shore, I do know that whenever he has a notes call, he makes a point to bring that specific writer on with him because he likes to have that writer's voice involved in every single revision and change. So it depends on all that stuff. So time frame from the time a studio like Sony would make a buy until the show actually airs. Here's a sense. I would say probably at least a year and a half. We will buy something, and depending, like if it's for broadcast, we're out pitching right now. So the model for the cable and stuff, I mean, we could buy and sell any day. You know, there is no time frame for them. It's a Netflix could buy a show, and as long as it all depends on the availability and of the writer, the showrunner and the writer, and when we'd want to do production. Say like Sean Ryan wants to do a show, and we're looking to have it air, or well, he's like, I have a show that Netflix is interested, wants to buy, and so we work out a schedule with them. When when's the most cost effective time to do production? Where can we get a deal, like Vancouver or tax credit? And so those all come into play to help us figure out a production schedule and a timeline. Once we know that, then we get in the room and we start writing. It's usually like 10 week writing before production. And then production will be, we'll be shooting for like 3 or 4 months. And it can be a while. It can be like, let me give you the broadcast example, because that's the easier timeline. We're in pitching right now. From now to, I would say, end of the year is usually around Christmas is when we submit the last final draft for them to make the decision whether to make a commitment to shoot the pilot. We'll come back from the break and we'll know what to shoot, and then we'll get into all the logistics for excuse me, locking in production designers and cast and all that stuff. And it'll be a few months of that kind of pre-production, and then you'll shoot the pilot, which will be like 3 weeks. And then it'll be a couple months, like a month or three weeks, like a month to cut the pilot, and then you'll deliver. And normally around May, they'll make decisions, because upfronts they need to relay to advertisers what potentially is coming up, and advertisers will start buying time. And so, it all happens, it looks like probably like 9 months. Residuals, all of that's contractually based. So that's all, that is all dependent on what you negotiate in the deal with the network, all of those. So that is all, case by case dependent. Great question, Linda. When you sell your pilot series, what is the writer's typical role? Does the studio always keep the writer on staff, or do they sometimes buy the series and keep the writer as a consultant? What are the different scenarios? Great question. Typically, and I will give, Future Man is a great example. It's our Hulu show. Kyle and Ariel are the two younger writers. They pitched the show. It was their idea. Great idea, amazing. They don't have the experience to run the show. So they are on staff, and they did get EP credit, but they are not showrunners at all. They are, on all our notes calls, but we hired a showrunner who is very experienced, and his job is to basically, coincide and work with them to make sure their idea gets across on the page, but he knows how to logistically keep the trains moving. And these guys are learning as they go, and they're fantastic. And we already can see potential for them to be showrunners in the future, but just not yet. Showrunners have to take into account budget, timing, just all the logistics that it's harder when you're a writer and you just have a really fantastic idea that you just want to make into a show. It's hard to take time away from your writing to focus on that. But when you're more seasoned, like this showrunner who's attached, that's not as difficult for him to simultaneously do that while also tackling the creative content, if that makes sense. So the goal, though, is especially Sony, we're very talent friendly, and talent, I'm meaning also writer. When I say talent, I'm not talking about cast. I'm talking about our creative talent of like the writer, director, producer. So what we do is we want to make them happy, and it's tough to instill a lot of confidence in just a completely new scenario. So what we do is, of course, we would want to keep that writer on staff the entire time. We'd want to make them feel empowered. We wanted that make them feel involved, but we would also be realistic with them and say, listen, you want your show to make it on the air, you got to let us do our job. So you're not going to be on every notes call because it's just not logistically smart. You're going to be writing, but when we do have notes and stuff that are significantly going to change the characters, I want to make sure you're in the room for those notes calls because you're our voice, and that's important. The writer would not be a consultant unless that's of their choosing. Like we have some, when I was working on Nashville, the show Nashville, when I worked at ABC, the creator of it, she basically said, I created the show, now take it ahead. I want to focus on other work, but she still gets paid for every episode. So she was technically a consultant on that show. But generally writers don't want to be consultants. They want to be EPs on the show and, be able to be involved in every single aspect. So that's a fantastic question though. You will work your way up from baby writer and, show seller to that amazing kind of mogul, but it takes time, and pitching one good idea does not mean you are going to be the showrunner. That's just something really to be that I want you to take away. Okay, let's see. So are contracts still like exclusive to Studio Network? I'm sorry, I don't understand the question. Contracts for what? Let me know. I'll try and answer that if I just get a little more specific. Why wouldn't one be a showrunner of a TV series that you would pitch or create? Hopefully I answered that, because showrunner does more. They make sure the show is running. They're not just creatively creating the show. No, not at all. Sometimes they're not even in the room writing. Do you know what I mean? Like they're on set in rehearsal, making sure you're on time. And if the network says we need the 107 draft by 7:00 tonight, he or she is knowing how to kind of adjust the schedule. So there's one writer in post helping on that episode. And yeah, so you should know that showrunner is normally not even the person who had the idea for the show. So that doesn't mean anything. Let's see. Hi, Maya. What's the best? Ooh. Shouldn't we be writing spec for existing airing IP? Yes, I'm old. Christopher, you're not old, and that's a great question. That is a dying art. I will be very honest. That's a dying art. Most of those things we are being sent to us that are spec scripts. Like I had last year out of 1,000 scripts submitted to me for staffing. I'm exaggerating a little bit. I had one that was an Orange is the New Black spec. And I remember it because people this day and age even say now, given all our different outlets, it's harder to even get a sense of that writer's voice if they're writing for another show. But in the same vein, if you're trying to staff on, say you have a spec for a Grey's Anatomy and that's your dream place to staff, I would think it's not, if I saw you had a spec for Grey's Anatomy, I would read that before I would read your original sample. So it depends. I would just honestly, like, if you are able to, I would have a sample of each just to, come armed as best as possible. But it is a dying art. People really want to get a sense of your voice and what characters you would create and what you would bring to the table. Because even if you were staffed on that show, they would want your original ideas. Let's see. Best networks for high quality sci-fi content. Oh, that's a great question because, it's changing. I would say right now, Stranger Things has changed in the game, man. They're making Netflix just one of the best places for any content, and that's sci-fi included. I would say also, AMC is great. They have their Walking Deads and their Preachers, and they have the sci-fi element and very high production value. Hulu, fantastic. The stuff we're making right now with Hulu is very, very sci-fi, fantasy oriented, and it looks fantastic. I would say Amazon's tough. I haven't seen them really spark too many sci-fi things. What else? Cable. Sci-fi is just a tough network because it sounds like it would be, but I don't know too many people who even watch sci-fi. And I don't think that they spend a lot of money on their shows. Um, yeah, I would stick to, yeah, the premium cable kind of stuff like AMC where they have a lot of money to play with would be the best bet. Or even like HBO these days, like the Westworld and Game of Thrones, man, they are spending money on pilots. So I would say HBO and HBO, AMC, Netflix, Hulu. Those are your sweet spots. Um, Angie, this is a great question. I hate how difficult it is. Do you have any opinions on how an unrepresented writer would send material to Sony? You wouldn't. Unfortunately, you wouldn't. If you do, it would just get trashed. There are so many places that even have a legal rule saying they're not allowed to accept unsolicited material. When I worked at Lucasfilm, that was a huge rule. In fact, somebody would send a hard copy script and we legally had to package it up and send it tracking with a tracking link or whatever information back to that writer with a legal document saying, we didn't look at this. We're not going to steal your idea. You're not allowed to submit this kind of thing. I think there's something happened at a broadcast network where an unrepresented person submitted something that eventually got back to the network in a negative way as to them owing money for stealing the idea, something to that end. I will say these types of things, to get your material to Sony, is you need to have an agent, because every day I talk to agents who are like, I have a new writer. Can I send to you? I'm like, please do. I'm always looking for new voices. And the agent backing gives that extra confidence. The executive's not wasting their time reading somebody who's like such a newbie that they don't even know how to do like normal formatting. So I know that that's a shame, because there are some people, like lovely folks here who are in this webinar right now, who are totally, capable of being staffed and at that level, and they just haven't had the luck, honestly, to have that agent submit them. But I said this in the beginning, but I'm saying this again. I'm trying my best to be such an advocate and helper to up and coming writers and producers and directors, because I know from myself how hard it's been to even rise the ranks to make it to in the executive world. So I would like to do whatever I can. I don't know on that, and if that means you have to do one-on-one consults with me or do the month mentorship or whatever. But my goal is to help writers get their stuff. And it's part of my job, just in general, to note things, is to get it to the best place it has to be. Because if anything, you and I can talk about great ideas that I can potentially be like, we could sell this to a network. Like, we could get this someplace. And I have tons of really fantastic, hardworking, amazing agents who are dying to find the next new up and coming unsigned people. And I've been trying my best to find the great people here who I could flag to them. So however I can help, but honestly, you won't get anywhere without an agent or a manager or somebody like me who can just get your script to that person, a connector to that degree. Okay, let's see. What are the questions? Yeah, I think overall, though, you guys are doing a great job that you're even asking these questions. The writing game is so tough these days. A lot of shows, they get renewed and they renew most of their staff, which means everyone gets bumped up a level, and that leaves one spot open for a staff writer. Networks these days have a lot of stipulations for diversity, and they might say like this new staff writer needs to be a female or a diverse person, or fit this kind of mold to kind of check off one of their initiatives that they're trying to do. And unfortunately, that doesn't allow us to kind of get even the writers we want staffed. On that end, also, it's really difficult because you'll have the showrunner has a friend of a friend who he's like, yeah, I'm just going to staff my friend. And the showrunner, especially if they're, more than a season in or two, they have power and they have the control of their room. And even if I'm to say like, listen, I flagged for you like a dozen amazing up and coming writers, all diverse and all willing and capable of being a star in your room, and you want to go with, your brother's best friend who just graduated from some like program that didn't even have really writing classes, like that's really unfortunate, but it's not our choice. So I would say just finding those people who are really constantly pound the pavement for you and really just believe in you. And it's really, really tough, but just please don't ever give up. I've been, the same advice as was given to me as I've spent my time through different jobs trying to be like, how do I get up, rise the ranks as a network executive or as a studio executive or whatever. It's just, this business we're in is so shitty in the fact that it's luck, it's timing, it's who you know. And unfortunately, some of us don't come from a world that any of that applies. I certainly didn't. I grew up in New Jersey. My mom's a teacher. My dad has nothing to do with anything in the TV world. And yeah, and I didn't have the easiest routes up. I know some people who are my age and have risen the ranks without doing the work. And, like it's tough, but I hope that this was helpful. And I hope if you guys any other questions, I can be reached and be of aid in any other degree. But you guys are all kind of rock stars, and I'm really happy and honored to be doing this webinar.
Well, awesome. Thank you so much. That was so many questions coming at you.
If there's still time, I'm happy to do more. I wasn't sure where we were.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's up to you. I'm good for a little bit. If you would like to go a little, I've been trying to watch the queue a little bit so that you don't get overwhelmed, but there are a few more in there if you would,
do you mind queuing them up then? Because I've lost track of which ones I haven't answered.
Oh yeah. So anything in the open one is not yet answered. At least I didn't hear it. So I've been trying to get rid of some of these ones that were answered.
Okay, let's see. Didn't hear this response. I want to ask again. How do you determine a network target audience to determine if your idea would work for them? Also, is there a company that sells the idea of pitching at conference? Is this a good idea to pitch at conferences if you don't have an agent?
Yeah.
What do they mean by conference? Does that mean like the pitch sessions that you guys have?
My guess is it's probably one of those pitch conference, like writers have those like weekend things where you can do sort of like speed dating style pitch sessions. That's But Octavia, if you want to clarify that, feel free to do that in the chat over there or over here. That's my guess.
Okay, cool. Okay, so Octavia, yeah, we can do a few more minutes. I can answer.
Okay, great.
A network target audience to determine, well, okay, so a network in general, you should have a sense of what their audience would be when pitching to them. So say like ABC, and I'm sorry I keep using ABC, it's just because I worked there, so it's like default. ABC, their sweet spot is the 18 to 49 female, right? So some places like MTV, it's 18 to 34, and they kind of bridge the line between male and female these days. And so you kind of should, as a network becomes the network that they are, you would know their audience. Like Netflix, their audience is all across the board because they do everything. Preacher these days, it's a lot more 18 to 49 men or men who are very comic book heavy and into the genre of it all. So if you have an idea, I think you would know where it could live based off of just how that network is perceived already. There are places that are still changing their question marks, like Freeform. I know they want to steer clear of being known as like ABC Family 2.0, but they also haven't really clarified what their intention to be a network is. So that's all still in question. So there are some networks that you would have a tougher time targeting what their audience would be to determine if your idea would work. But again, I think most networks, even if it's super genre heavy or super sci-fi, as long as you really focus, and I really want to drive this home, if you could really focus in on having that intense, strong character and emotional thread, it doesn't matter if it's in space or a Western. Like, as long as I could relate to what a character is going through, I'm an audience member. You know, it's for me. So like Westworld, I never thought I would fall in love with that. And I just thought what they did was just so psychologically thought-provoking that it kind of translated to beyond being a sci-fi show. I would say I don't know a company that sells the idea of pitching at a conference. I've actually, I haven't been to Banff. I know that some of those places, they're great. Listen, as many outlets that you can get your idea across to, I would say it's a benefit. Don't limit yourself just because you think there could be a negative view as to pitching at a conference. I don't see that. I think more practice you can get in pitching is ideal. The only fear about pitching at those large conferences and you don't have an agent and all that stuff is, I think there's a higher chance of other people to just get a sense of that idea and potentially take it. But don't worry, the agent thing, if you have a good idea, you have a good idea. If you don't, and if you don't have an agent, agents frequent also sometimes those kind of conferences also, or they have friends and executives like myself who go to those conferences and will flag the best pitches. And that's also an avenue for them to reach out and kind of try and find your contact information to see if you'd be a potential client. So that's something. I would say just don't limit yourself. Things sell there, so it's another avenue. What is turnaround in production for weeklies? 2 or 3 weeks lead, or are they all written in pre-production before shoot? I don't know what a weekly is. I don't know. I'm sorry. I'm not really sure what that question means. So I can't really answer that one.
We can come back to that. Yeah, Chris, you can clarify over in the chat section what that question is. We'll get back to it if we have time.
Okay, cool. Also, Chris, when you say, do you get locked in on short order series? Locked in what degree? Like, what do you mean? Hold on. I didn't have the chat open, so I'm going to open it now. How long do you have between shows on a weekly series lead time? So generally we like to have between 4 and 6 scripts kind of in the pipeline before we get into production. It depends on the show also, because sometimes some shows, like we've had a few Netflix and Amazon shows that have they start the room and they're so fast with the writing that it's moved things up. But I would say at least like probably 3-4 weeks at least. Yeah. Let's see. Locked in as waiting to hear about the next season. Ah, gotcha. I hate the fact that most of my answers are this, but depends on the network. Amazon, Hulu, they they'll buy us as a whole series. Like The Tick was bought as a series, and we're we're at the helm at the network. Like, we're at their whim. They basically will tell us, they'll let us know when they'll let us know. And it's really frustrating because they don't have that broadcast timeline. So they usually wait, like the Netflix, the Amazons, and Hulus, they all wait to get the metrics back from the viewership. So Amazon, they are getting a sense of how well the tick is doing. And we're given verbal kind of positive feedback from the network. So that gives us the indication that there potentially could be a season 2. So we'll start talking about, if we were to have a season 2, what would the room look like, kind of conversations. But they don't officially pull the trigger until they get like solidified numbers as to how well the show was doing. And unfortunately, we'll keep checking in and asking them when they'll know, and they just sometimes won't know. For broadcast, usually if it's like one of their fall shows, they'll usually wait till upfronts to see how advertisers respond to pick up for additional episode or seasons. Or they'll just see like a crazy great ratings. And that's the one bonus about broadcast ratings being so available immediately, is if the show does amazing, like if Good Doctor gets like, 15 million viewers or whatever, we'll get a season 2 pickup the next day. I'm like they won't want to lose out on that level of viewership. But so it totally depends on the outlet. It really does. There's one scenario this year that we had with AMC where they wouldn't let us know about a pickup, even though they'll softly be like, we think this is going to go, they'll tease you a little bit, but they were giving us a hard time because they were like, we want to pick up for 2 seasons. So to do that and get the money ready for that, we might not know. So you could be picked up for 1 or 2 seasons. We'll let you know soon. So it's like different scenarios like that. I think I answered Jordan's question. I would say just first step after having stable scripts is just make sure, to get it to people like myself or anyone at Roadmap or anyone who's kind of a connector, to get it to the people who could get it to those powers that be.
Sorry about that. I realized that when some of mine cut out,
yes, you missed this question
in your queue that I don't have in mine. So you probably have a ton. However much we've got time for, probably like, if you've got a few more minutes, whichever of these you feel most passionate about, we'll do it for a couple more. If whatever you got.
Let's see. I think I'm going through all the ones I've answered on my end.
Yeah. Sorry, I lost those.
No worries, please. This has been great. I'm not going to answer the movie question from Grace because I don't work in features, and so I'll talk about her web series though. How do we involve with pitching a web series? Web series is the same scenario as pitching a TV show, just pitching to that outlet. We're starting to get, a little bit more in conversations with the people like the Go 90s, and hopefully Snapchats will have web series. YouTube, we definitely, we're trying to do more of a show series on YouTube, but YouTube Red and all those, it's those outlets that you have to pitch to because they don't support the longer forms. Answered all this. Okay, so Christopher, you said CW is both studio and network, but before it combined with UPM, were you to get hired for a show like Buffy, but it was on the bubble, you might get moved to WWE Raw, for example. Basically, you were being groomed for an exec position along the lines of exec. I'm sorry, I don't understand that question. You did bring up an interesting thing though, how CW is both studio and network. Let me touch a little bit upon that. Is CBS also has their studio and network to a certain degree. So interesting for the noting process, we'll send them scripts and the network executives will just not read the certain scripts, or like they'll just ignore. There are certain executives under CBS that they get all the material because they're under the CBS umbrella, but it's only time for the studio to do the notes. Now it's time for network. So it's interesting to see how they handle some people just deleting from their email because they know, like, I'm in network mentality mode right now, not studio. But I'm not really sure what you mean by the Buffy question. So if you want to clarify, I'm happy to answer, but I'm not sure.
Hey, you have done. Oh, go ahead. You're answering.
Oh, no, I was going to say, I think I've answered all the questions.
Yeah. After this one, I was like, any parting words of wisdom? We're already over. You've been amazing and given extra time. So thank you so much.
Of course. No, of course. And yeah, my parting words of wisdom are, I encourage you guys to just keep doing what you're doing, because honestly, like, the energy and enthusiasm and drive that I've already seen just in this chat session is really impressive. And Roadmap, I feel like I've been connected with such wonderful people and so many like really great ideas. And so I would love to just be, an asset to any degree to help answer questions or help you guys, kind of get your ideas and stories where you want it to go. Cause it sounds like you all have a lot of like things in play and in the works, and a lot of really smart questions. And so, I just think that really great questions means that you guys have potential for great things to be happening very soon. So, I mean, whatever I can do to help. That's honestly, I feel like in this town, it's just so hard to find really great, especially women have such a hard time moving up in this town. And I just want to be an asset and helpful, because I do have those connections now that I've spent so much time in this industry. So, I'm here and willing and able. And so just grateful that you guys thought my advice was helpful, and anything else I can do further, let me know.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Maya. It was awesome. I wanted to say awesome again, but I realized I've said it 14 times. So.
Well, I'm glad, because I felt like I was a little all over the place, but so that is our industry.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm glad it all worked out. Thank you, everybody, for attending.
Thank you, everyone.
Questions and interaction, and we will see you all soon.
Yes, and somebody asked if they need my email address. However you guys handle,
Yeah, we can talk to. Yeah, we'll be happy to coordinate and figure some of that out. So just email me, guys. I'm Brianna at Roadmap Writers. And we'll figure
Brianna, thank you for everything. This was fantastic.
Of course. Have a great rest of your day. Happy Emmys.
Guys, watch the Emmys. Watch the Emmys.
All right, bye.